Welcome to the Humourology Podcast with me, Paul Boross, and my glittering lineup of guests from the worlds of business, politics, sport and entertainment, who are here to share their wisdom and their use of humour with you. Humourology is the study of how humour can dramatically improve every aspect of your business and your life. Humourology puts the fun into business fundamentals, increases the value of your laughing stock, and puts a punchline back into your bottom line. Please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. My guest on this edition of the Humourology Podcast is an international leader in computer science, mathematics, and tech. She's the founder of the award-winning social enterprise of the Stemettes, which supports and inspires young women interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In 2020, Computer Weekly named her the most influential woman in tech. When she isn't inspiring young people in this pursuit of technology and science, you can find her sitting on the board of Durham University's Computer Science Department, the Department for Digital Culture, Music and Sports Digital Skills Partnership, the British Library Council, and the Research England Council. In addition to all her work in the tech space, just last year she served as the president of the British Science Association. Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon, welcome to the Humourology Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a good laugh.
Well, that's what we're here for, Anne-Marie. And, talking of laughs, your parents were Nigerian and you're the oldest of 5 children. Was humour actually valued in your family?
Oh, value. Value is a great word. I mean, there's definitely a lot of humour. We're quite funny. But I don't know, how do you know what you value? I don't know if it's valued. I think it's maybe taken a bit for granted that we can be quite funny and are a funny bunch.
Yeah, but I mean, was it? I mean, some families, they look down on when sort of laughter lightens the mood and the attitude.
Yeah, we don't do that. We're not like that. We've got a very good sense of humour as a collective. We're always laughing. My dad can be quite a funny person as well, even when he's not trying to be. So yeah, no, we're definitely always laughing. Yes.
The Jesuits say, "Give me a child of 7 and I will give you the man or woman." Would that be true of you? If we looked back at Anne-Marie at 7, was she already, this extraordinary brain with this extraordinary drive?
Not drive. And the drive one is a funny one because folks always say, what would you tell your younger self, or what would you tell your teenage self? And I always say, I tell myself to take myself more seriously. So I wouldn't actually say I was a 7-year-old with drive. I definitely had determination, but in terms of, qualitative ambitions, I didn't have. But I was funny. I've always been funny. I was funny as a 7-year-old. I was the class clown the whole way through school. So that was definitely a big device that I had, that I maintain, and I still use to some effect as well today.
So you described yourself as the class clown. I mean, was that partly because you were bored with what school was teaching you at that time, or did humour have other functions in your school life?
So it was pretty much because of that. It's like, yeah, if I already know what they're saying, I've already got it, or I've already finished. I'm going to entertain myself. I'm going to entertain other people. I like to have a laugh. I like to enjoy myself. I still have it through our company culture. Joy is one of our values. Very seriously, we like to enjoy ourselves at our events. And so yeah, it was mostly to entertain myself because I was often bored. And why not have a few jokes with your friends? But I think also eventually, it ends up being the kind of the sugar that makes the medicine go down. So if there is something tough you're dealing with, or if things have got very serious all of a sudden, then humor is always a tool you have to lighten the mood. And so sometimes in school I would do that if I'm teetering on the edge of trouble, then a joke will take you a long way, a long way away from falling off that cliff edge.
Well, from a psychology perspective, what humour and jokes do is they reframe everything, don't they? And so they also change the state of everybody. And I'm fascinated that with Stemettes, you actually say that joy is actually a part of the culture
why not enjoy yourself? It was something, so we did this exercise, as you do with organizations every a couple of years ago, of what's our culture, what we're striving for, what's the core of what we do, what's our DNA almost, or the ethos is the way that we're running what we're running. And with Stemettes, we're trying to convince people, we're trying to break a social norm, we're trying to convince folks to see themselves in a different way, we're trying to convince them to understand and make a more informed decision really about their future and what happens next. And we're doing that against the backdrop of what can seem a very serious, what can be an incredibly formal relationship that folks end up having with that subject content of STEM, right? Your maths lessons, unless you have a fantastic maths teacher, often aren't a hoot. That's not the thing that folks look back and remember. But I had all the fun. I have a lot of fun in my really serious tech roles, in the boards that I'm in the spaces that I'm in. I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I derive a lot of pleasure, but also we have a laugh as we're doing it. And so with Stemettes, it was really important that if we're providing an alternate space, what is often called an informal science learning space, that we lean as much as possible into that informality, and we allow folks to come and have some sense of joy and almost have a positive, formative STEM experience. So at least, if we've listened to Beyonce or Taylor Swift or whoever it is as we're coding, which you wouldn't normally have in a classroom or anywhere that folks might see as more serious of a coding space, then why not have that and realize that, the seriousness isn't part and parcel of the STEM and the STEM knowledge. It's just where most folks engage with it, and why not give them an alternate space? But yeah, we can laugh, we can have a joke.
I'm intrigued by Beyonce playing while you're coding.
Why not? I mean, what better? What better?
Put a code on it.
Yeah, why not? Why not have Beyonce? I mean, when we started 10 years ago, Justin Bieber was the big one. So we had Justin Bieber in the background, but you'd have that at a party, or you'd have that at a gathering, or you'd have that in a social space, even if it's just in the background, you're not at a concert. So why not have that if you're coding? We had suites, we had the laptops, we had bean bags, that kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be all uptight, serious, formal, almost angry, right? There's a lot of joy in building, joy in creating, joy in problem solving. And so why not lean into that and give folks an alternate experience, really?
I think that's fantastic. And I've heard you describe the core ethos of Stemettes as the 3 Fs. Obviously not the same 3 Fs at the launch of Channel 5, which was slightly different. But you've gone free, fun, and food.
Free food tastes better than food that you've paid for.
Well, it certainly does. But with that, what I'm thinking from a psychological perspective is it's really interesting that you are essentially anchoring people into what you describe as joy. That's through music, that's through food. And so, every time they listen to Beyonce or they eat a pizza, they are essentially going, I associate STEM with fun.
Here's hoping. That's the plan. That's what we're aiming to do. That's what we are able to do, and it allows them to relax a lot more as well, which, as I say, often if the only time you've engaged with STEM has been in the classroom, not everyone's privileged enough to have fun or have joyful memories in their classroom. And so this allows us to at least provide some alternative memories for folks to hold on to as they go into adulthood and make decisions on their life and on their journey.
Do you also find that fun and that humor is actually at the heart of creativity as well? So actually you get more out of people if they are having fun, if they are relaxed and joyful.
It can be. I mean, different strokes for different folks, but I find it definitely does oil the wheels a little bit for folks, especially if they, sometimes it can seem scary. Sometimes it can seem, like you're too small or not good enough, I guess, to do and cover some of the topics that we do at Stemettes events, whether it's cyber, cybersecurity, whether it's Python, which is a programming language, whether it's agile, which is a way of developing and creating new products. So I think the joy and the enjoyment definitely allows folks to feel a little bit more comfortable and to step into that a little bit more. Yeah, definitely. I think it is that medicine that helps that sugar. It is the sugar, that helps that medicine go down in some ways.
No, I love that. I love the thing. But Stemettes has been going for 10 years now, is it? And it's had a profound effect on inspiring young women and girls to pursue STEM careers. What inspired you to actually create Stemettes, and what is the organization's mission?
Sure. So our mission is to engage, inform, and connect girls, young women, young non-binary folk, and those around them to the STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths, but also STEAM field, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths. And we see that really as the heart of innovation. And so 10 years ago, back in 2013, I started this off as a New Year's resolution almost. That, I was someone that was in technology, I was someone that was a woman, I was someone that really enjoyed it, really wanted to be there, but was able to kind of look around and, after a series of events and attending a conference in the States, saw that we had this almost shrinking minority of women in the field. And I knew that wasn't right. As I didn't want to be in a shrinking minority. I didn't want any, future children I might have, to feel like their mum was the one weirdo woman left in tech. And so started Stemettes as a response to that, but also, knowing that in your formative years, there's so much of what you get to understand about yourself and around the world. And so if we're able to create these environments for young people to come and explore, then we might be able to counter some of those social norms, some of those depictions in the movies, in TV, and what maybe their teachers might say, what their parents might say. So they can really kind of understand that actually, there's not one face of innovation, right? You don't have to be dead and white and male with a beard and have all those four in order to be useful. That actually you could be not one of those four things and still have a lot to contribute. But this wasn't a message that was being driven home. This wasn't something that folks were able to step into. And then you had the people like me who hadn't even noticed really that was the overarching theme or stereotype, and were able to tap in. And it's like, you shouldn't be as, you shouldn't have such a lack of perception as I do, be hard-headed to be able to thrive in this field. Actually, all kinds of folks really are needed actually to contribute to a lot of these technical conversations. They're way too important for us to leave to the computer scientists when we see what technology is doing, the decisions it's making, the power that it has in today's world. Why have an entire gender, being held back from that? So that 10 years ago and still to today, 10 years ago and now, that's the aim of what we're trying to do. And it's a long-term approach, but still wanting to give folks that opportunity that it's not all just dependent on your classroom experience. A lot of people have great classroom experiences, a lot of people don't, but actually that shouldn't get in the way of you being able to survive as a citizen, right, in a world that's becoming increasingly technological.
Is it just classroom experience? I mean, I get the fun aspect, or is it seeing somebody who looks like you? I mean, both gender diversity and diversity generally, who you can relate to. That becomes important, because I started my life for my sins at the Comedy Store for many years, and really it was blokes. And, then Joe Brand and Hattie Hayridge were on.
Yeah. So you're right. It definitely is about the classroom, and it is about those stories. I talk a lot about the history of the different women that have been before that, all of us are on GPS because of Gladys West, right? We're all on Wi-Fi because of Hedy Lamarr. We had the flight receiver on Concorde because of Stephanie Shirley. And so there's all these names and all these women, all these people, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, Marie-Sophie Germain, like the list goes on and on and on of names that have been obscured. And so, you end up thinking that, you do have to hit these magical 4 attributes in order to be useful in the STEM space. And so, with Stemettes, it's about, countering what happens in the classroom. And some people, it will be role models. For some people, that's what they need to see. For others, it is getting hands-on and trying to create and make and break things. For others, it's being able to see the altruism in so much of what we're able to do across the STEM and the STEAM field. And everybody needs something slightly different. But what we're trying to do is kind of counter that narrative and evolve that social norm of who does the STEM. But we know that there's a lot of work we're having to do to counter what does go on in the classroom. Because again, all of these things are reinforced through our curriculum, in our textbooks, in the society that our young people get to see, day in, day out.
I think you're 100% right. And unless you feel that you can see somebody in that space and you can relate to them, it kind of feels like it's not for you. which I think it took a long time. I understand in the business world and I understand in the comedy world, but there are parallels in every world that unless you see somebody who looks like you don't think it's for you. And, that could be class-based as well,
It could be all of them. It could be the protected characteristics and beyond. And I think the frustration with this, though, is that when we look at technical fields, it's so deep set. And like you said, it's across society. It's not just technical fields where you have this, whether it's football, whether it's sport, in music, there's a lot of places where we don't have the right kind of representation. But I think the frustration I have with technology is we have such a rich history. Like I just listed a load of names. There's the historical chorus we had at Bletchley Park. There's so many names. And so many of them have been obscured that actually if we simply tell the story of what has been and the full story or both sides of the story, this wouldn't need to be something that folks were up against, right? You should really be able to call on anyone that looks like you or doesn't look like you, that is away from that kind of default norm that we have of what a technologist looks like.
But do you think that it has been deliberate erasing of people like Gladys from the conversation, or do you think so that was written by the men with beards, the white men with beards?
Yeah, I mean, the dead white men with beards. Yeah, I think there is a lot of it that's been incredibly intentional. This has been about power. There's a great book by Ma Hicks actually called Programmed Inequality that talks a lot about in the 50s and post-war there was there's a very concerted effort actually to take women who were doing these technical things, and then sometimes it was seen as clerical. Other times it was because they had, better dexterity. And so you almost see it in actually Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. There we go, to talk about another comic. You kind of see that in the show where she sat doing the telephone things. And so it was seen as a very female thing to do. And so post-war, all the men returning, there was a concerted effort from certain governments to say, actually, no, this is how we want to rebuild society. This technology thing is going to go far. Let's get all the men back in. Let's get the women that were there, to train them up and then get them to manage them, and then we'll kick them all out. And that was what happened actually in quite a lot of the tech industry in the UK. And Ma Hicks talks about this quite a lot in their book. And so there has been, the other example I always give is the Eiffel Tower, which of course has the names, I think is of 72 scientists and engineers around the kind of bottom rung. And of course, all of them are male names, and it wasn't just men that were, at the Sciences Po and, in all of their academies. And there were people like Marie-Sophie Germain who, initially they didn't realize that she wasn't a man when she was writing in, because then they'd write mathematical letters to each other to kind of work together. When they then knew she was a woman, it was like, well, we'll have you in because what you're doing is pretty good and we actually kind of need it for our research work, but we know you're a woman, and so we won't have your name up alongside your colleagues' names on the Eiffel Tower. And so there's a lot of these things that were very intentional initially, but have become cultural as we go on. We still see it today in, women's names and where they appear in the order when we've got published research papers, for example, in the stories that we tell in the media of entrepreneurs, of technology. We tend not to include the woman's name if she's there. And so these things become cultural and embedded, even if they're not necessarily intentional today.
No, that's really interesting, because what it takes is a lot of resilience, if you like, to actually combat this. Do you think that humour aids resilience, i.e. you can laugh it off or whatever?
For many, it becomes a coping mechanism. There are definitely folks that kind of have to base their resilience in humour. I think, that adage, if you don't laugh, you'll cry, I think definitely comes to mind often as well with some of the things, some of the experiences that I get to hear that folks have had. And are having, but I think there's also, in addition to humour, there's also that kind of safety in numbers, which is why we do so much of what we do at Stemettes. It's about gathering folks together. It's about them being able to not only celebrate but commiserate together. And I think that also then helps, folks to know that it's different. If you feel like it's just you that's being treated that way, it's one thing. If you know that there's a group of folks that are being treated that way and there's that common theme or string or characteristic, then it does help you feel a little bit better. You do have folks to joke with, but you also have folks to work with, right, to change these things, to evolve these things, and to allow others to thrive in these spaces where they need to.
Well, and it's about finding your tribe as well, isn't it? And sort of community being, that's one of the most important things, because if you're just individuals it's hard to be resilient at that point because, you think, but if you're a tribe and you're all together, like you say, you can commiserate with each other, but you can also laugh it off. If
need be. Exactly, that's exactly what it is. So that is very important as well, to have folks to laugh with you. Rather than
no, I'm sure they'd never do that now. Mentorship is, I suppose, at the cornerstone of all your work. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the significance of mentorship in STEM, and maybe share a story about a mentor who's had a profound impact on your journey?
Yeah, sure. So I think mentorship is a big part, and sponsorship comes with it. And I always say it's a kind of a holy trinity when you're building anything, career or otherwise, of having a coach. And I guess comedians and comics will have the same thing. You have coach, you have mentors, you have sponsors, right? A mentor is the person that's, put this joke in that way, put the punchline, leave a bit of a gap or whatever it might be. Whereas a sponsor is the person that says, there's a space that's opened up on this show, I've put you in for it, right? And I think it's really important to have that combination of both, but actually where you can ask someone to be your mentor and you can ask for the advice, you actually can't ask someone to sponsor you, right? And so it's something that I've seen across the years of, working with mentors to get that advice and know how to act when you are in that space or how to make the most of it, but even more so building relationships, working out loud almost, or communicating on what you're interested in or what you're up to or what your aspirations are, so that then sponsors can know that it's worth putting you in for that billing, right? Or it's worth putting you forward for that prize, or it's worth supporting your promotion that you're going for in that particular year. And so for me, it's been all about that balance of, not just working with mentors and, reflecting with folks on building a team, on trying to engage folks, what it looks like to be that change maker, to be that leader, and to work on those things, but also to have folks who say, I'm going to put you forward for this podcast, or I'm going to, nominate you as our charity of the year at our company, or we're going to bring a couple of friends along with me as volunteers here, and they might be able to help out with X, Y, and Z. And so for me, I've been really fortunate to have both the whole way. And whether it was mentors earlier on that were in my career, that were managers, that were really supportive of me, would listen to presentations and then put me in front of, the senior execs or whatever it might be, or whether it's sponsors who have spoken about Stemettes, spoken about me, spoken about what we've been up to when I've not been in those rooms. Doing Countdown was a huge thing. Folks are always like, how did you end up presenting on that, right? How did things like that happen? And I was like, well, yeah, Rachel Riley effectively sponsored me. She didn't mentor me on here's how to do the maths, but it's like, actually, we know each other, and I trust your maths, and I trust you to do this and give it back. So, here you go, step in and take a shot at that. And I think that's really, really important in whatever you're doing, to have mentors, but also to ensure that you're open to sponsors. And this isn't about the money. It's about, saying your name in those rooms where you don't have that agency, or you might not be able to put yourself forward for things.
You talk about Countdown, and you talk about Rachel Riley, who has a terrific sense of humour as well. Is good humour essential to being a good mentor?
I'm not sure. I think it, with a mentor, being a good mentor is so relative to who you're mentoring. And we've run a mentoring program for so many years at Stemettes, and it's always interesting. There are certain people that don't end up having a match in one cohort, and then they'll be matched in the next cohort, and that goes swimmingly, right? Or there'll be folks who try to connect initially and actually it doesn't work out, and then again we match them again, and they do really well with others. So I think with mentoring, I think a sense of humor is helpful, but actually it's only helpful if the person on the other end almost has the same sense of humor, right? Or has an overlapping sense of humor. Whereas when the humors don't match for whatever reason, I think it does make it tougher to, build that relationship, right? There are some people who aren't joyful, who aren't funny. And they deserve to be mentored and looked after as much as the folks who do have a sense of humor. So I think we have to accommodate in some way for that too.
Well, I'm going to push back slightly on this, because you're a scientist and you'll like the pushback on this. Well, I would say that it's incumbent on a really good mentor to find the funny or the joy or something about the person they're doing it, and then work towards that. Because I would say that the meaning of your communication is the response you get.
Yeah.
So therefore, a good mentor should be working at the level of the mentee.
They should, but not all mentees are looking for humor. I think joy, definitely. And that was why we ended up with joy rather than happy or funny or anything like that. It was about joy, because joy, I think, sits a little bit deeper. And there's many more things that can lead to joy that aren't always necessarily kind of humor led, or don't always start with humor. I guess humor might be somewhere on the pathway, but it might not be the entry point, or it may not be the exit point, right? It might just appear somewhere in the middle. But I think you're right. Joy is definitely an element of what we're looking for, because that joy, there's joy that comes from achievement, there's joy that comes from progress, there's joy that comes from that upside. And I do also believe that, you know, you need the darkness for the light as well. And so I think there is something as well about that up and downs, or, you know, times when there are commiserations or there are downs as well as the up. So I think it's a good mentor is able to ride that wave and bring people along and prepare folks for that wave that you might have in life anyway.
No, I agree. And the fact that you can take something dark and make light of it is part of the whole Humourology ethos. And the whole Humourology project is not built on jokes, just sort of thing. I would say that joy is a big part of it, as is humanity, as is humility, as is good humor. And I don't mean that in the sense of joke. If you have good humor, it means you're nice and you care about people.
Of course, I agree. I do agree. Of course, yes.
Oh, I thought we were going to have a row there for a minute, Anne-Marie. I was hoping for a row.
I mean, there are a lot of folks, you know, you mentioned the 3 Fs. It was quite a big thing for us to say we're a STEM organization that's focusing on free, fun food. And there are still some folks that have to get their heads around the fact that, yeah, that is something we use to promote what we're doing, who still will question and be like, no, it should be about the STEM or about the knowledge or about the, and I'm always like, well, no, because for some human beings who aren't in this space that are wanting to engage with this, you know, running with that and having that as a top line, isn't it? And so there is I like that, the human element, right? I'm not going to disagree with that. And I feel like there's a lot of folks who forget about that, actually, or deprioritize it. Or actually, I think that's the key to many of the problems that we have in the STEM sector and STEAM sector, but also in life in general, right? Folks not being able to be humorous about what's going on, even in the face of darkness.
Yeah. Well, I think you're 100% right. And I think that people who are trying to get too serious about it perhaps don't understand that you've got a specific outcome with Stemettes. And it's like, how do we get more people in and interested and then moving on, rather than, you know, it's got to be serious. Well, you may miss a load of people because they haven't been brought in from the fun factor.
You do miss a lot of people because they haven't seen that fun factor. That is it. That's the heart of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me. Anyway, this is Humourology. So what makes you laugh?
Lots of things make me laugh. I feel like I'm always laughing. It's so funny you asked the question at the top about valuing it in my family. I feel like there was so much laughter that I'm constantly looking for opportunities to laugh or enjoy myself. And so I don't know, in the very basic, you know, I watch a lot of television. About 90% of it, maybe 85% of it is comedy. And whether it's US comedies, whether it's sitcoms, whether it's panel shows, you know, whether it's even something like Taskmaster, I don't know whether, I guess that fits in as a panel show, you know, that kind of, I spend a lot of time watching funny things. So I think there's a lot of TV that makes me laugh. Often there are lyrics, song lyrics, you know, kind of situations, things that you might listen to that just, you know, sometimes if you hear the song for the 50th time, you notice something you didn't hear the first time, and that often makes me laugh as well. And then ironic things. There's a lot of ironies in life. There's a lot of kind of cognitive dissonance on lots of different things, and that always does make me laugh. How, you know, you can be both dark and light at the same time, for example. So kind of almost contradictions, I think, in some ways make me laugh.
I'm interested in something you just said about, you know, you see the funny side and you look for the funny. Is essentially what you're doing. And I say to a lot of audiences, you know, what if you want anyone to go into any state, you have to go into that state first. And I think you are a prime example of somebody who actually knows how to manage their state, go into the state, and then let people join you, which is what I would say charismatic and people who can move mountains, that's what they do. Are you conscious of that? Or was that any time of learned behavior, or just unconscious competence over the years?
I don't know. I have no idea. No one's ever put it to me like that. I do not know. I wonder. I think that, so there's elements of it, trying to reflect on what you're saying now. There's elements of it that I wonder. I'm always in that state, and I enjoy being in that state, and I'm quite forthright and guarded about wanting to remain in this state. For me, it's like a line I don't like crossing, or I'd rather not cross. I want to enjoy myself, whatever I'm doing. And so if it's something that I'm not going to enjoy myself, unless there's a bigger, almost like delayed gratification reason for us being super serious in this particular meeting or in this particular space or on this particular occasion, I tend to always want to stay in the joyful, enjoy yourself kind of situation. And so if others don't want to meet me there, then often I will remove myself from a situation if I don't feel it needs to be that serious. But then also, why wouldn't you want to join me in enjoying myself? I think, where they say misery loves company, I don't know what the alternate side of it is I don't like the company of misery. And so it's like, if I'm enjoying myself, folks often want to enjoy what I'm enjoying or enjoy along with me. In fact, I've got a friend, I've got a great friend who's a big entrepreneur and does lots of things, and I'll always WhatsApp her different random things that I'm thinking, and she's like, yeah, you're so funny. And our whole friendship is just based on, it's not on what we can do on our businesses and whatever. It's, there'll always be a funny thing that I send across that's my reflection on something, that it's like, no one else would have seen it that way, Anne-Marie, but of course that's the first thing that came to your mind.
Well, but what I detect in that from a psychological perspective is an optimism, if you like, about life, about people. You're seeing the best in anything. I mean, because from a psychological perspective, 95% of all your emotions, both positive and negative, are influenced by how you talk to yourself. So you are constantly going, I'm seeing the good in this situation. You know what? This person may have a grumpy face, but let's see if I can change that. Is optimism important to be great at anything?
So I wonder if it's optimism or it's a managing of your own expectations. So I think so I would put myself as almost an optimistic realist rather than optimist in and of itself. But I think with a lot of things in life, the more that you go through, and again, the more you look for kind of irony and kind of reflect on what's going on, I think there's a lot of times where if you come in, I almost feel like it's almost the reverse. It's like I don't want to hope for too much. I can only control how I feel, or the situations that I'm in. And so if I'm going to approach this, I want to remain in this state. So that's going to be the approach. That's going to be the view that I take on whatever it is that we're handling. And I want to hope that things can be improved, or I want to hope that there's capacity for things to go well. But also I want to be open to the fact that they might not go well, but at least we tried, right? Or at least we looked at it from this point of view, or at least we, had a laugh while we were working through it, or at least we enjoyed ourselves while we were working through it. And I think that's where I'm coming from in most situations. Because life is short, right? And why not, why spend so long bemoaning that won't work? It's like, well, okay, cool. At least we know that won't work, but this is the upside that we have, or this is the alternate, or this is how we can change it, or this is a way to look at it instead. So I think it's perspective. I think maybe that's what I always end up kind of coming back to is, it could always be worse. It could also be better. And there are certain things that are in our control and others that aren't. And so focus on what you can do. Be optimistic about what you can do and what's within your reach and within your remit and within your agency. And if it's not, then you kind of have to leave that, have the perspective to leave that for others. And, it could be worse. I mean, I also have this thing where I find it really hard to be jealous of people on a really deep level, because I always know I don't know the full picture. And I think it's the same kind of thing of, then it's harder for me. The only person I've ever been jealous of in my life is my husband. And that's because I know him really well. So when certain things happen, I'm like, wow, I know exactly what that's linked to and how that's going to help. And I wish I was in that position at this point. But other than that, I find it really tough actually to be jealous of people and of situations, because you never really know, or can never really fully put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think all of those things add up to perspective, which then allows you to then have this approach to problems, approach to life, approach to business, approach to people, approach to change.
Yeah, I kind of describe that as attitude as well. There's a couple of things that come to mind. The whole American thing about your attitude dictates your altitude. And I know it's a bit twee and an Americanism, but there is something about thing. But also, it starts with the attitude of gratitude. Where we go. My opening thing is I always say I'm the luckiest person in the world, because what's the alternative? Is to go, oh no, everything's shit. Anne-Marie, you'll never guess what happened. Yeah. I went to get a pastrami sandwich and they'd run out of pastrami. Just my bloody luck.
Yeah.
But we all know people like that. I mean, you just described what I would call, in the Harry Potter terms, the Dementors, the people who suck the life out of the room. And you described it as, I get out of the way of those people. I don't want their energy around me.
Yeah.
How important is energy to that sort of like whole state of what gets you moving?
It's incredibly important. You do have to, another, I don't know if we call it Americanism quite, but, you protect your energy. And I think I see it, I don't know if I'm the luckiest person in the world, but I see it as a privilege that I have where, I am able to remove myself from situations I don't want to be in. And also I'm the way that I enter a space also, there's a particular ways that I'm able to do that, or that I'm invited to do that by sponsors. And so, being able to protect your energy as you enter, let alone when you're in that room, right? It's harder almost for me to end up in that room with those Harry Potter type Dementors, because, there's a series of questions or series of processes we would have been through beforehand for me to understand what is really going on in this space. And is that something where I want to spend my time versus all the 9 other places and spaces that I could be spending my time in at that very moment, in that very locality. And so I think that's, protecting your energy is incredibly important. And there's all manner of things, whether it's shutting off notifications, you spoke about gratitude. I have a gratitude journal that I fill out on a daily basis. And so I think that there's all those kinds of things that you end up doing to maintain that energy, to protect that energy, and also to diffuse it when, because there, like we said, there's highs and lows, to diffuse it when terrible things do happen. I end up not being too reactionary to bad news, because, like we're saying, it's like, well, another day and other things happened. If nothing bad happens, then maybe they're not really doing much. And so then you have to roll with it. And I think that's another thing that's really important in business, because, no customer is guaranteed, no supplier is guaranteed, no member of staff is guaranteed, no industry is guaranteed. And so I think you have to do that also to stay sane.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that what you're demonstrating and why you are so inspirational to people is because you maintain your state and you maintain your attitude. And, just having a journal has actually been proven, and a gratitude journal has been proven to be one of the simplest things that people can do. And anybody listening to this should take away that idea that you write down, what are you grateful for today? I always go, we're the luckiest people in the world. I'm very grateful that you came to do the Humourology podcast, because I feel like I've made a connection with somebody who has a great attitude. That's always a learning experience for me. It's like, what can I actually learn and take away? Or what am I reminded of?
Yeah, an edifying experience, which is what you want to maximize. I think this is it in life. So thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm enjoying it.
No. Well, but the whole point is, if we're having fun, the audience will have fun.
Here's hoping.
Cue the letters. Well, that was the most boring hour we've ever had on here.
Yeah, very presumptuous. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll tell the producer to edit that bit out, just in case. You speak in public, and obviously you do television with Countdown and numerous other things, and radio, and you speak a lot on stages around the world. Public speaking is still the number one fear. What are your best tips for engaging an audience quickly?
Oh, good tips for engaging an audience.
I think I know it, by the way. Just I'm asking. I think, because this is what I do, and I think what you're doing is you are going into such a great state first that you are taking them into that state with you when you do it. I.e., you are going out there. I do this when I speak as well. I always say that my attitude is that everyone is lovely. Because what's the alternative?
Yeah. I mean, on a low level, probably psychologically, I feel I probably do have that in my head. I mean, I don't struggle with public speaking, and it's interesting you say kind of a fear. It's one of those things that maybe every 10th time I come off a stage, someone will rush up and ask me and be like, how do you handle it? How you do? You know, one time I was on stage at Hay Festival, and someone came up to me afterwards and was like, Anne-Marie, when I go on stage to speak, I start sweating, my heart rate, and I've passed out twice. And I was like, that sounds like, you know, a whole nother set of problems I could not advise you or help you on, because my body, I don't have such a physiological, biological response to being on stage. And so I think there's a lot of things that go on for me subconsciously that then I almost don't have to deal with whatever fear there may or may not be of public speaking, because I didn't, like you're saying, the attitude, energy, all of these things probably add up to me being able to kind of just step on and say what I'm going to say. But I think every audience is different. So I spend a lot of time, I always have a brief before I do anything on stage, because I want to understand the audience. I want to understand actually their pain points. And I think that often is one of the first things I do. I want to start with, look, I see you, I understand you. And often I'll put a joke or whatever else, or a reference or something in that folks might be like, yeah, okay, cool. But I also was 4 years old, you know, and sometimes it's really broad things. Like most folks remember, if you don't remember being 4, you have a 4-year-old, or you've met a 4-year-old, or there's a 4-year-old that you care about. And so there's that kind of connection you're able to kind of link folks to. But I think the other thing I try and do with audience is be honest and be very frank. And I think there is this Stemettes informality, or this Anne-Marie informality, right, that becomes the Stemettes thing. That is also a big part of my stage presence. I'm not trying to present dramatically. I'm actually just having a conversation with folks. And some folks are really surprised. They're like, yeah, I felt like you were just talking to me, you know, like it wasn't a big presentation. We were just having a conversation. And if there are small sidelines I want to have, or jokes I want to make, or if I'm going to go really quiet on this part or go loud, or I'm looking in their faces. And I think that also steps it down and allows the audience to really feel like we are having a conversation, we are talking, and I'm just sharing something with a friend that I think's been really interesting that they may not have reflected on. And, you know, this is it. You're either surprising folks or you're reinforcing something that they've heard. One way or another, there's a response that they're having there. And I think I enjoy actually trying to guess which one it is for an audience. How much of this is a surprise and how much of this is incredibly familiar and then allows us to connect, so that then we can join each other on the surprises, and you can kind of believe or understand or process or take in or take on the surprises that I've put in whatever I'm sharing.
Oh, by the way, what a beautiful encapsulation of everything I teach people about how to be on stage. You kind of do the joy aspects of you go in. You also go into it with an authenticity, which is like, people can smell fear. They can smell if you're being inauthentic, if you're putting on an act for them. But it's very important. And the bit I really loved is when you talked about it, because I say this as well, when people go, I'm afraid of speaking in public. And I go, when you go to a coffee shop with your friends, do you take notes with you about, did you see that?
I do say, if you need do your research. If you need the notes, take the notes. But the other thing I say to folks is, and we have this with our young people, often it'll be a pitch, an elevator pitch, right? You're talking about yourself. It's like, no one's going to call out and say, no, you weren't born in Naples, you were born in Milan, right? And so I think that's the other thing of, the more authentic you can be, the less that there's going to be a challenge, right? Or people are going to, laugh or whatever, or have that negative reaction because they don't know you as much as you know yourself. And so even if you're not the expert on the topic, you're the expert on yourself. So for goodness sake, go up and say yourself, be yourself, share from your perspective, your point of view. And if you are an expert, then, that's part of yourself. That passion, the joy, the research, the time you spent in that thing you're an expert on is also part of you. So lean on what you do know. Of course, research, take the notes, go to the brief. If they can share questions in advance, if you know that's a pain point for you, then do it. But, I also have this now. I actually get really frustrated when folks come to a brief with me and they're like, here's all the questions we're going to ask you. And I'm like, no. I don't want to hear it. Because if I hear it, I'm going to give a rehearsed, and actually it's much better when you catch me by surprise and get me off the cuff, and it's the truth, right? I love a Q&A. I love something like this, a back and forth, because I don't know what's coming next, and we can be honest, and we can flow, and we can ebb. But that's because I'm a confident speaker. If you're not a confident speaker, take the time to say, what are the questions, prepare them, have your notes, and also remember who you are, so you can answer the questions with your notes and add yourself to it, and then you'll be flying.
Yeah, I think people can have notes as a backup, but I actually think that really what you're talking about is ultimately listening and being present. And most people, when they go into talking mode, aren't listening and present. And really, our job is you listen to an audience, even if they're not speaking, because you listen with your eyes. And you go, oh, did that hit? Oh, yeah, that works. What you and I are doing, exactly what we do in a coffee shop, is we go, tell me more about that. Oh, I'm interested in that. How does that work? That's, I think, the key to any kind of speaking, is to actually be interested in the people and the person, and then just have the confidence to talk about, as you said, what you know and how you know it. Well, we could go on with this conversation for about 36 hours, to be honest with you. But we've reached the point in the show that we like to call quick fire questions.
Hit me.
Quick fire questions.
That's the reaction I wanted. Come on, bring it on.
Yeah.
You've worked with a lot of businesses all over the world. Who's the funniest business person that you've met?
What a question. The funniest business person. Oh, man.
If you can't think of anyone, it's probably you.
No. Don't say that. It can't be. It's funny. There are a lot of funny people. You have to come back. This is why we need the 36 hours, because it's going to come to me. I'm going to wake up. Overnight. And it's
By the way,
why did I not say Nick? Or Nick Fry was pretty. I don't know if you'd appreciate being called funny, but Nick Fry was pretty funny.
Well, amusing then. All right. If we don't want to call him, who's Nick Fry and why is he amusing?
Nick Fry, he's at McLaren, and he was actually the guy who ran the Mercedes F1 team before it got sold to Mercedes. And he's pretty funny guy.
But, well, there you go. Nick Fry gets a shout out. I would think. What book makes you laugh, Anne-Marie?
Great question. Yes. A book that made me laugh. I loved the Horrible Histories books when I was younger. I would not read anything else until today. I still have a skew to non-fiction books, and I think it's because of the Horrible Histories books. I found them hilarious as a kid.
They are. They're brilliant. And actually, I think they made a brilliant TV series out of it as well, because the songs really added to the whole thing.
That's how I remember the Henry VIII Wives, actually, is the song they have from that series. It's a very good series. Very good comedic actors, actually, because they did, there's lots of things. They did the Sky One. There's quite a lot, they're like a collective, and there's quite a lot of shows that they did Horrible Histories, actually, on CBBC. Yeah.
No, they're great. Well, this leads me straight on to the next question, Anne-Marie, which is, what film makes you laugh?
Well, most recently, there was a film, although this is not a recommendation at all. There's a film called Honeymoon. It's a Bollywood film that I watched called Honeymoon, which still makes me laugh because the storyline is wildly hilarious. There's still bits that I'm still not fully understanding why that they were necessary in the 3 hours, but yeah, it's called Honeymoon. Bollywood film called Honeymoon.
Okay, well, all our listeners will be rushing to see why that's funny. Thing. We're going to take a shift to the other side now and
You were going to ask me for a TV show. I was going to say that's a pretty hard one, but yeah, no, go on.
Go on then. Okay, answer a TV show that makes you laugh.
Very, very hard. I mean, Staff Lets Flats holds a special place in my heart. Parks and Recreation holds a special place. Arrested Development, but I think at the and The Office US, controversially, I think at the moment Abbott Elementary, which is an ABC show that's on Disney Plus, is my favourite.
Oh, I haven't seen that, but I'll put it on my ABBA, ABA.
Abbott. So
Abbott.
Abbott Elementary. And it's The Office in a school, in a public elementary school in Philadelphia. I think it's Philly, somewhere like that in the US.
Oh God, well that's great because I never even heard of it now. So now it gives me something to go and look at. Taking a shift completely to the other side, what's not funny?
Bullying's not funny. Gossip sites on Instagram are not funny. It's quite a lot of stuff. Kind of teasing, making fun of folks is not funny. Yeah, there are a lot of things that aren't funny. I mean, death is not hilarious in most cases too. So yeah, there's a lot of things that aren't. There's a very long list, I think, of things that aren't funny.
No, but I'm thinking just personally, things that you're such an advocate for women and equality. That's obviously not funny to you. Is the inequality?
Yes, the inequality is not funny. I think the other thing that I don't find funny, but I find quite irritating, is the skew or the proportion or the way that Hollywood and certain corners of kind of entertainment media, the stories that they decide to tell. Trying to think, I think someone was telling me the other day about an SOE club in London of women of spy, in fact, not women, ordinary spies who during the war were kind of sent to all manner of different places and had this club. And every time there's another, I don't know, I'm going to pick on a franchise now, but Maverick, what's the Top Gun, right? Top Gun, or what happened at Vietnam, or even something like Oppenheimer. Every time another one of those movies on that we've already heard these stories. We've heard it already. I don't find it funny that there are so many stories we should be telling, so many stories we should have in movie form. I'll tell you what I don't find. I don't find it funny that we still don't have a film on Stephanie Shirley's life. And I did not find it funny, actually, when I saw Hidden Figures the first time. And that was obviously about the women that were part of the coloured women's calculating group at NASA in the 60s. I did not find it funny that as we were watching the movie, I think Katherine Johnson at that point when the film came out was 98 years old, and they'd only just started to tell her story, name buildings after her at NASA. Things like that I do not find funny.
Good, and nor should you, they're not. Going back, what word makes you laugh?
Meh.
So good.
It's always meh. Yeah, MEH. I did this. Susie Dent from Countdown. I did her podcast, and she was like, "Yeah, what's your favourite word?" And it's meh. I think it's because it makes me laugh, but I think it's so underused. It's a very Anne-Marieism. A lot of people I know get a meh from me fairly regularly. In fact, my agent's always like, "Please don't reply meh to this. Can you send a different word?" I love meh. I don't know why it makes me laugh. It just does.
Well, meh is both a word and a sound, because my next question was what sound makes you laugh, but you might say meh is the sound that makes you laugh as well.
I don't know why it makes me laugh. There's a bus service on my road that runs, I think, until midnight every day, and the noise of it running past always makes me laugh when I do get to hear it. It's just going all day. It's because it's so warm now, and we sleep with the windows open, and you just hear it all. It just makes me laugh. The bus is going up. No idea why, but yeah.
It doesn't matter. If it makes you laugh, it makes you laugh. Penultimate question. You were very, very bright and still are, but as a child, you passed your first GCSE at 11, and then you got into Oxford young.
Two at 10.
Two?
At 10.
At 10? Gosh.
Yeah, the A-level was 11.
Oh, the A-level was at 11. Oh, excuse me. Anyway, I think that establishes you as quite bright and going to Oxford to this thing. Would you rather be considered clever or funny?
Oh, funny. Funny. It's and again, I don't know if that's because of what people see when they read the bio and they hear and everything else, but folks are always shocked. You know what you were saying earlier about, I don't know, my countenance, the way I am? Folks are always shocked when they've read the bio and they meet me and I'm like this. They're always like, I didn't imagine you'd be, I never would have, and I'm always like, why? Because I'm supposedly book smart. I can't have a personality, have any sense of humor, take a joke or even make a joke. Folks are always surprised that I'm making jokes. And it's like, what, why? Like, I'm not gonna, glasses and lightning strike in the middle of my head just because I know some maths. Like, the two of them aren't mutually exclusive. So yeah, I actually feel like it gets in the way for the person being called clever, as well as for the folks calling them clever when you use the term clever, because again, there's so much of a stereotype around almost know-it-alls. I had this once. There was a show on in the theatre, in UK theatres, based on Hermione from Harry Potter. And I have to admit, I'm not really a Harry Potter fan or anything. Didn't read any of the books, or I haven't watched any of the movies or whatever it would be. And I remember she was known as a SWAT, right, or teacher's pet or something. And I remember a couple of radio shows getting involved or getting in touch and being like, hey, we want to talk to Anne-Marie about this because Anne-Marie was a teacher's pet and a SWAT. And I remember, and you always kind of do the pre-interviews with folks.
Yes.
I remember being like, huh? Me? Teacher's pets? What gave you that impression? And it's like, I understand where you got the impression from. I was very much not a teacher's pet. Very much not a Hermione type. And because you've said clever and that only means one thing for so many folks, it means that then I'm not allowed to just be beyond that title of clever. But also there are a lot of folks for whom clever has to become then their personality type because they're trying to maintain that vision of being clever. In fact, I recorded a show. So I've done Richard Osman's House of Games. I don't know if this will make it into the edit, but it's really interesting because there's a whole load of chemistry things that I either forgot or got wrong. And Richard had this thing, was like, as a genius at the chemistry. And I'm like, well, I'm just a computer scientist. Like, I don't know everything. I don't know why anybody would have assumed I know all the things. These are the things I do know. It's very well documented, but there's a lot of things I don't know. And so, yeah, I feel like clever gets in the way, actually, of you being seen as a human being, I guess.
Oh, that's a really interesting answer. Clever gets in the way of you being a human being. Funnily enough, I think that in order to be funny, you have to be clever because
it's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible that there's a link, but yeah, one over the other. I would.
It's a bit of a trick question, anyway, Anne-Marie. It's a bit of a quick question, and finally, desert island gags. You can only take one joke with you to a desert island. What is it?
It's the koala joke. Do you know the koala joke? Has anyone ever said that? And I always have to look it up so I don't deliver it incorrectly. Why did the first koala fall out of the tree? Oh man, there we go. Why did the first koala fall out of the tree?
I don't know.
It died. Why did the second koala fall out of the tree?
I don't know.
It was tied to the first koala. Why did the third koala fall out of the tree?
I don't know.
It thought it was a game. I don't know what it is about this. And then there's the final bit, which I don't find as funny, but it's fine. Why did the man cycling through the bush fall off his bike?
I don't know.
He was hit by 3 koalas.
It's always a joke.
It's always.
But what I can tell is it really is your favourite joke because you are in hysterics. And if you were on that desert island every day, you would be in hysterics.
Anytime I saw a tree, I'd think koala. By the end, was it Wilson he had? That mine would just be a koala that's put in the tree. That'd be how I get my exercise in. I'm climbing up and down trees trying to recreate the koala joke. But that is my joke, always.
Well, your joke brought us joy. You bring a lot of people joy, and thank you for so much for doing the wonderful work you do and being such a joyous guest on the Humourology podcast. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Well, thanks for having me. Well, it was a hoot. It was a hoot.
We loved it.
Oh, man.
The Humourology Podcast was hosted by Paul Boross. Produced by David Rose. Music by Steve Hayworth. Creative direction by Les Hughes. And additional research by Helen Sykes. Please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This has been a Big Sky production.